Yeah, it's a fun time of the year. I'll just kind of give you a little bit of context for who I am, and that way you know who this random person who reached out to you is. I'm an ER physician. I practice in the community here in Houston. Kind of going through college, med school, all that always had interest in kind of other stuff that my peers were like, "Why are you interested in this thing or that thing?" And kind of maybe a year and a half ago or so, found myself with the NFT craze. Seeing stuff on in the news and whatnot. Figuring out what it was. And initially, it was kind of a non-productive task of like me just buying NFTs and seeing what happened and what this is and whatnot. And then I realized that there's like a deeper level to this that was more productive and had the ability to change entire industries, and blockchain in itself was that kind of key to everything. And then I was like, well, is anyone doing anything in healthcare? And of course there've been people doing stuff with blockchain in healthcare for years. And to me, I was like, wow, there's this whole world of smart people doing stuff trying to make medicine better, healthcare better, that I hadn't heard of before. And so that's kind of what led me down this path, and that's why I showed up to that conference and got to hear from yourself and so many other really smart people, and that's how I came to reach out to you. So I was super excited that you were willing to chat with me and share some of your insights. I really did enjoy kind of what you're doing when it comes to blockchain, the pharmaceutical industry, and how that's moving things forward. And so would love to obviously talk about that and some other things today. But before we move on, if you could just kind of give like a quick one-liner on what it is that you do and your day-to-day essentially.
Yeah, so I am VP of Sales and Operations for Armas Pharmaceuticals today. So like a lot of small manufacturers on the generic side, we wear a lot of hats. So titles really mean nothing to all of us. You kind of touch a lot of different departments. So on a day-to-day right now, I'm still about 7 months in with Armas, but a lot of infrastructure work, trying to bring in some new technologies, data efficiencies on where we store data, how we communicate it with our partners. That's where blockchain comes in, and we'll get into that. A lot of hiring, stuff like that, pricing, and of course, sales. So I will be involved with retail sales, but I'm learning a lot about the hospital market, specifically how generic injectables move through the supply chain in the United States, which I haven't done before. Most of my experience has been selling in the retail side. So that's been fun as well. So I'm excited to speak with you. I did see some of your work, and I think it's really cool for someone, like yourself, to be hands-on with the patients out there and everything, but also taking, a chance to kind of like be a megaphone to say like, hey, here's what's going on here, and learning, also bringing it back to your patients, the community. I see a lot of what you do. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I think both of us, we're very similar in that it was just two passionate people about blockchain that kind of collided in Austin. And yeah, happy to talk to you. I'm sure we have a lot of cool stuff to go over.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. I feel like Austin's the best place for that. It's always all these new ideas coming to fruition and people talking about them, and then 5-10 years later you're like, oh yeah, I remember when no one cared about this thing or that thing, and Austin was having a conference about it, and then it's mainstream. So I guess let's start by I in medical school or residency, they don't really teach you about the pharmaceutical industry or business or any of that. What was your journey into kind of that industry like? And then going off of that, you mentioned that you're in the generic drug space. Can you kind of give a little insight into kind of, I guess, the big kind of silos that do exist in the pharmaceutical space, and then what the generic drug space is amongst those silos?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of thrusted into it. My father has been in the industry for a while. Started on the wholesaler distribution side, and I always joke I've been in the industry for 23 years, and people look at me and they're like, I can see them doing the math, and I'm just like, relax. Like, yes, I'm currently 36. It's 13 years old. Like, whatever that. And they're like, they look at me and they're like, oh, it's because I work there in the summers. My dad gave me the opportunity to kind of like learn how shelves are picked and orders are picked and NDC codes. And, summer after summer, I learned a little more, like what the administrative stuff looks like. And then eventually touched some of the legal processes. I did a couple internships with their legal that was sort of a friend of the company, and then did an internship for another company. And then I really wanted to try sales. So right after college, I did some branded sales and just calling on doctors, trying to build relationships and build awareness on certain branded topical dermatology products that I was detailing to dermatologists across, well, at that time was Brooklyn, Queens, basically all of Long Island, from Brooklyn all the way out to Montauk. So that was fun because I got to learn a lot about how that side works, how doctors think, what they care about. And that was another reason I'm excited to talk to you, because for the first time, I feel like now I can bring some elements of what I'm doing with the generic market into how it relates with you in your job. And that was that was such a big part of my branded experience. But for the past almost 8 years now, I've been solely in small companies that touch the human generics. So generic products that are no branded, all generic approvals, ANDAs, right? Abbreviated new drug applications approved by the FDA. And it is it's a competitive market. It's a changing market. COVID, definitely changed a lot of things, which we can get into, but it's fun at the same time. And at the end, we all keep in mind that there's people and patients that are taking our medications, and consistency, quality, supply. These are all things that people say, but we make sure we actually follow up on, especially at Armas. So the partners we choose, the companies we choose to make our medications in the Armas label, it has to be the right ones. It has to be ones that have that same commitment that regardless of where it's made, they are going to adhere to the standards we want to make sure quality medications are consistently brought to the U.S. patient market.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was taking a look at y'all's website, and I saw kind of some of the drugs that y'all offer, and a lot of them, like Zosyn or what, stuff that I use on a day-to-day basis in the ER. And I was like, oh, wow, you don't think about that when you're using it, but you're like, wow, there's folks that make the drugs and get them to the hospital, and huge supply chains involved in that. And so it's awesome to, like you're excited to talk to me. I'm excited to talk to you, to talk to the folks that actually make that happen and make those drugs available and get them to the patients and make things better. One kind of, I guess, more kind of broad question about the industry before we get into the exciting blockchain stuff is, I think healthcare and then the pharmaceutical industry as part of healthcare gets a bad rap for various things, right? Supply chain shortages, pricing, and it's a very complex system. There's so many parts, there's so many actors, there's things that, if you wanted to change or I wanted to change would, not be possible with a small group of people, just because there's things that have been done a certain way for decades and decades and decades. What, I guess, is something that you guys or the pharmaceutical industry itself gets a bad rap for, or is misunderstood when it comes to general conversations and 5-minute tidbit segments on the news, or even if it's, talking to someone, a friend, and them just kind of, dumping on the industry in itself. And you're like, well, you don't truly get that aspect of it. What would you say to, I guess, that person or that narrative?
Yeah, sure. There's a few topics that I think I could speak on. I think there's a few I'll probably stay away from just for sensitivity purposes. Like pricing is obviously, I think, a big one. Just for the common person, the common patient to understand what goes into just the cost of their medication, I think is a fair question to ask, to a certain extent. But at the same time, I think there's definitely a misunderstanding from a small manufacturer's perspective, like how much time, energy, thought, planning, and money to get a product out to market. And nowadays it's no easier because, there's new regulations that continue to sort of snowball, and not that we're against them, but things like DSCSA, track and trace, serialization, things that make a bottle of medication fully transparent throughout the supply chain. Yes, I agree with. It makes a total sense to have a full record of where each bottle lands at each stop point, right? A patient should know if a product gets recalled instantly, if that product is affected. I agree with that. But at the same time, that there's a cost to putting a program like that into the industry. And, for us as a small manufacturer, we participate, and there's a cost to serialization and stuff like that. But at the same time, there is pricing pressures of the market, of the supply chain, of the cost of running a business, right? So it's just sometimes our forces seem to be against us, right, in opposite directions. So but while I say all that, I think there's also opportunity for smaller manufacturers like ourselves, because we are known to be trusted for supply, and we are known to kind of deliver on what we commit to, especially with hospitals, right? And we do a lot of business with hospitals through the major wholesalers and other channels. But we have learned more than anything in the last 3 years, and especially since the start of COVID, supply and trust and consistency is important. Our country is very reliant in other countries for medication, right? And I think we all know that, and I think I see changes, but it's going to take a little while to get where we need to be. But altogether, I do see a good reaction from the US market since COVID. I think we have found a more collaborative approach with our customers, and vice versa. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the hope, that obviously, the last 3 years were so tough on every sector, every human, and that includes healthcare. That's at the top of the list. And so it's good to hear that, we are taking some lessons from that and applying those, rather than, just trying to go back to the same old norms before. So it'll be exciting few years, I think, in healthcare. But kind of, moving forward, when at your talk in Austin, I remember you talking about how Armas Pharmaceuticals is partnering with MediLedger and, using blockchain technologies to improve efficiency, conduct business in a way that, is going to be better for the industry itself, and in the end, obviously be better for the patient. Efficiency benefits all. And so kind of starting at square one, what is MediLedger? And then what kind of prompted Armas Pharmaceuticals in particular to partner with MediLedger? And we can start there.
Yep, it's all my fault. First, MediLedger is a blockchain-backed network. Now, nowadays, we don't want to use blockchain first, right? We want to say what the network can do, the problem it can solve, and then mention blockchain, because it's like blockchain's a scary word still, right? Where I don't believe that, but I that's kind of the big thing I heard from the event, is that we can't say as much that it's blockchain backed, but I don't believe in that yet. I think people just need to be educated, right, on what it does, what the technology is, why you can trust it. We're at the ground here. So now, if you have that trust, if you at least have that basis of what the technology is, right, and you can understand where it can be applied to other things, that's the journey I went on, right? And probably you as well. I went on that journey, and then I start thinking of my common life, right? I think of my jobs. And then and this is me as a person, I'm a problem solver, right? So if you give me a tool like this, forget it. It's going to spread like wildfire. So when they tell me that, number one, they can solve the GPO roster problem. Now, when I say GPO roster problem, let's first talk about what a GPO is, right? I think that might be a good starting point. A group purchasing organization. Now, that could be a group of pharmacies. That could be a group of doctors' offices. That could be a group of distributors. That could be a group of hospitals. GPO, the definition of it ranges, right? But it can go across all different kinds of classes of trade and types of customers. So those are moving and fluid. So if a GPO named, Christmas GPO, right? I'm looking at a Christmas tree over here. They have a membership list, right? And it starts moving. How do we stay updated on who those members are? Right now, a lot of those lists are sent over email. which require a manual step of loading them into some other system that the manufacturer might be monitoring or maintaining. But there's timing issues with that. There's errors with that. There's errors with the DEA numbers and the HIN numbers that might be used to identify the customers if those aren't updated. So my point is there's a lot of steps and there's a lot of delays, and there's also a lot of information used within those steps that are the data is old or not updated. So even just for GPO rosters, if you can just think about how blockchain works, right? It's a way to create a system of truth. It's a way to put something between partners that we can trust together to say, yes, this was the past and can be the future, right? This was a past transaction, and this is how we will have this transaction occur in the future because we agree on this now, right? And that's the beauty of smart contracts and blockchain in general, is that it can make the past we can agree on and the future we can move forth with, right? So from there, if a GPO roster gets updated, I'm the head of the GPO. And I push out that update now into a blockchain system, and I do business with, say, 20 manufacturers. Instead of sending out one email to 20 manufacturers or 20 emails where 20 people have to update an email or ignore it or not use it because they don't have the time, now they can just be connected through a blockchain system where instantly the roster is eligible. Why that's important, because now at the wholesaler level, where those contracts are typically loaded, they need to have that roster as well. Because the wholesaler, right? The wholesaler is selling the product for us, the manufacturer. So a lot of times these type of customers are buying all of their product through the wholesaler. So basically you have three parties that need to be on the same page on what that contract states. So now we're talking about contracts where originally we talked about the customers that were eligible for those contracts, but the contract details are important because the GPO, the manufacturer, and the wholesaler all need to be on the same page. So essentially, if you think about apply blockchain to a contract and you allow that blockchain system to sit beneath the trading partners, now there's no need for EDI communications. There's no need for any email communications with contract details. It can all be instantaneous as soon as the person who is creating those contracts pushes it into the network and makes it available to its connecting network participants or members, whatever you want to call it. But that's what MediLedger is focusing on. The GPO rosters, keeping rosters up to date automatically, communicating contract details. That's the first two. And then I'm going to take a breath and let you ask a question, because then we could talk about chargebacks, and that's a whole separate animal in itself.
Absolutely. No, thanks for kind of going through that. You give the perfect problem of people assuming that it's, 20 teens and that we probably have an efficient way of doing something. And no, it's still emails and Excel files and a lot of manual stuff. And a lot of us don't realize that that's how stuff is still done in a lot of important work. And so I guess my question is, say previous to using MediLedger to using it now, I know it's hard to put a number on, but how much more efficient is the system? Would you say it's like, it's saving like 20 hours a week kind of on your end kind of thing? Or is it not really about the time? It's more about knowing the integrity of what you're getting, the data, and making sure that, you're not going to have overlap or redundancy or waste of resources. I guess in which area has it helped most from kind of your perspective in Armas Pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, so I would say we haven't used it enough to give solid use case like, hey, this is that, the numbers behind it and all that. Absolutely not. No, we're still at test phase right now.
Okay.
And partly is because, like most small companies, we're limited with resources, and we had some projects and growth going on. And sometimes it's hard. Like a project like MediLedger is all hands on deck. We have 9 employees now. So 9 employees running an entire company, right? So it got a little slowed down, but we're in test phase. And I like it because when you're in the test pilot sort of sandbox, as I call it, you get a little bit more comfortable, right? You can make mistakes and play with numbers in there and shoot stuff around, and it doesn't really matter. So we're in talks with some other companies that are chronicled as who makes MediLedger, but there's some other early adopters that we are going to move quickly on, like sort of going into a live test or a live production with a small group of customers just to see how it works live. But really, we just need more people aware of it, right? And that's kind of where I think I come in. Like, I'm not a technical person. I'm not, I'm not one of the people creating all this the technology behind it. I'm not from Chronicled. I just believe it to be something that can help our industry run better. It could take so many things that we waste time on every day. Like, I think about the departments around chargebacks. A chargeback is the process of the invoice and debit memo between a manufacturer and a wholesaler. And not to bore you guys with the whole process, but it's very cumbersome, and there's a lot of errors back and forth. And there's got to be alignments on what pricing is and when contracts start, right? So if we're not on the same page, there can constantly be disagreements on what each of those chargebacks should or shouldn't be. So there's people at both companies, manufacturers, customers alike, departments, people working hard to try to prove that they see the money or see the transactions the correct way. And I feel those people can sort of align their efforts onto other things like customer management, patient management, just supply chain jobs, like things that are more productive to growth and new product development, instead of error management, right? I hate supporting bad processes. If we have a bad process, let's fix it. And that's what I feel out of the gate MediLedger is tackling, is three like problems that sort of have just been not either noticed or brushed under the rug by the industry. And to me, that's just the start. That's just the start.
Absolutely, yeah. Eliminating inefficiencies is, at a minimum needed to, improve any system or industry. And it seems like this is definitely, tackling these kind of mundane, boring things that no one wants to do and bogs everything down. And, hopefully it can, improve all of those. Curious, you kind of joked and you said it was all your fault, kind of MediLedger and Armas Pharmaceuticals and kind of experimenting with that. You obviously had a personal interest. I imagine there was maybe someone in your company who's skeptical or said maybe this might be a waste of time. Was there someone like that? And if so, did they come around, or how did those conversations go? I was just curious about that.
Well, this is actually, believe it or not, my second company onboarding MediLedger, just the way things worked out this year in my career. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't think anybody's a skeptic from what I've come across. I don't think it's skepticism. I think once you get past like the basic, oh, this is not crypto, then your mind opens to like the business part of it. I really think it's so funny. Like, and I was there just so short ago. Like, I'm not an expert, but like when you said Bitcoin to me, I couldn't tell you what Bitcoin was, what blockchain was, or I didn't know I had no clue. And if I take that mindset and I think of coming to myself 2 years ago with this concept and talking about blockchain and important transactions and stuff like that, I'd be the same reaction. I'd be like, no way, that's crazy. So like, again, like a lot of the work that we're doing and that I'm part of with a couple of our partners and everything is just really teaching people what the basics are. Let's just understand what blockchain is. It's okay. I have no problem admitting that I don't know something. I don't. I think as an industry, we need to admit we don't understand what blockchain is. And even if as it is today, it's not perfect. Even if it is the perfect solution is not out there. Collaboratively, I think for the long run, as an industry, everyone should have a seat at the table and try to find a way to use this to make our industry better, because it's only the start. Contracts, chargebacks, rebates. I think the next step would be like rebates and fees and things like that we have to pay, things that are another level of friction between partners, areas that I think can just be automated and agreed upon. Yeah, and I think down the line, when you start incorporating how our pharmacies and how our hospitals can potentially communicate with either their wholesalers or manufacturers, you can create so many frictionless points between where patients need to get their medication quickly. And right now, it's just, I feel at every stop there's areas to improve, and we're guilty of it as a manufacturer. I hope and I know the wholesalers and the distributors and the chains out there, they all know they're not perfect. And that's what I'm seeing out there from the market, is that we're having conversations to do things better, but blockchain scares people. So I just want to be part of the, like, hey, come on, just listen. Let's just listen, get an idea, and then see where it can potentially help your company, even if it's 5 years from now. 5 years will be here like before you know it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's crazy that we're almost at 2023. Makes no sense. And supply chain, you kind of hit on it a little bit, is a buzzword, and it seems like for in particular in the last 3 years, there's always some medication that's on shortage. Every morning I wake up and there's a hospital email saying this is out, that's out, be careful using this, and whatnot. Where have you seen, obviously, chargebacks, rosters, contracts, that's all going to improve efficiency, which in itself, improves the supply chain, kind of fortifies it. Have you seen anywhere else in the supply chain where, blockchain or MediLedger or any other technology you may have seen kind of in this arena that may improve the supply chain, make sure that we kind of foresee these shortages coming way down before it's, hitting CNN and Fox, and it's kind of a national disaster kind of situation?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I have no crystal ball, but if I like to think of things way, way, way into the future. And I think about kind of the perfect world now, if you're able to get blockchain in all the places. And I think in our industry, if you could place a blockchain system between all of us, there's pretty much an argument for just about every transaction, every record, everything that occurs, from packing slips, which are a requirement, right? That's another FDA requirement. Packing slips, EDI 856s. How about transmission of invoices, credit memos, inventory levels? How about shipping records, transparency on tracking, just putting that all into blockchain system, always available when it becomes available. Just making things more transparent, more open to our partners. I think that's what blockchain can do. So if, without putting numbers on it, without kind of trying to dive into the specifics, if you just become more open and work together, and that's what, to me, blockchain does. You decide what information you want to share with your partners. You specifically choose those partners you want to share it with. And if I have information always readily available that can help my partners run their business better, and part of their mission is part of my mission to get medication to the patient, why would I not give them access to that information if it doesn't harm me? But things like blockchain make it possible. It's just right now, to get companies like ours to adopt something new like this is a big lift. For us, where we are very small and have minimal infrastructure and technology, it's actually easier, because you don't have any renovations, you don't have any attachments, you don't have any connections you have to deal with, right? For us, it's almost like going from a VHS player to Netflix. And I use that analogy all the time, but it's the truth. Because if you currently sit with a DVD player and it's all wired into your dad's 1996 surround sound system, it's probably a whole overhaul at this point, and you're going to have to move on. Like we're jumping forward, right? And that's what we're seeing. At least I think that's the friction. Also, the companies that are using it, they tend to be either stubborn or resistant to change, or just it's difficult to integrate their current technology. And they're possible, they can connect to MediLedger, API integrations and all that. But it's just that's where I see a lot of the time wasted right now. And I think that will take time. heads of technology are not jumping at the front of their line today in front of their CEO and saying, I feel like upheaving our entire technology system for blockchain. Like what guy would want to, what guy or girl would want to do that, So I think it's going to take time, but I'm not in a rush. I kind of like where MediLedger started. I think the company's taking it serious, and I've seen them all. I'm talking to them all. They're all part of a lot of these events and everything that we've been doing, and different meetings. And I know that there's some companies really looking to push into the future with blockchain. But I do think it can bring the entire industry full circle, even to where we deal with product destruction and returns, which can be very, very time consuming and wasteful to the industry. I think that's another area that we could tie in blockchain as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Curious, how large is MediLedger itself? I know you don't represent them or anything, but is it, like a multi-hundred person company, 50 people? How?
That's a good question. I know they've had a lot going on, and I know they've been in talks with additional funding, possibly, or investments, because I know that they've done that a few times over the years since they started. But I would have to say they're getting close to 100 or
Okay.
somewhere on there, but do not quote me on that. It's been a while since I check. I kind of deal with the same guys, and we live in our blockchain world, and my role with them is really simple. Like, one, obviously a customer, so I'm trying to onboard their system, but the other is like, all right, but we should be doing this, and why doesn't your thing have this, and why can't we add that, and when can we start doing the rebate thing, and other things like that. We're trying to guide them into where the problems are, which to me is mutually beneficial. We guide them into new problems in the industry, which to me are guiding our company, Armas, into better ways to run our business.
Awesome. One kind of non-blockchain related question, I kind of alluded to this. We have a lot of medical trainees and whatnot listen to this podcast. Just kind of quick 1 minute recap of, top to bottom. Say I have a vial of a medication that I'm giving to a patient, and then that medication was manufactured. Could you just go from like where that supply chain starts to where it gets that patient? Just kind of all, not all the steps, but kind of the big boxes that are on the way. Just quick 30-second, 60-second version of that.
Sure. I mean, without going into the specific ways manufacturers can be modeled, typically you have your manufacturing site, right? At that point, the manufacturing site probably purchased the raw material elsewhere, or sometimes they may have a raw material site closer inside there, whatever. So they'll do the manufacturing there. From there, finished goods, if they do the packaging and finished goods in the same site, they're going to ship it to their warehouse, to wherever they do the shipping. And in some cases that involves the overseas part of it, right? The import. So at that point, in our case, we use a third-party logistics company in Tennessee that holds all of our finished goods and does all of our pick, packing, and shipping. So as orders come in from our wholesalers, chains, and distributors, they will fill our orders and ship it out to them. So now in your case, most likely your product that a hospital will be buying from is through one of the major wholesalers. So at all times, our product will be and should be loaded in stock there in your DC. So now if you're down in Texas, many DCs down there for many of the big customers, right? So I guarantee you that the Armas labeled product for our entire product line is most likely stocked down there. So if we were doing business with your group that you were part of, or your network, contracted or on their own with manufacturers, we could potentially be supplying your hospital Armas label product, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm so fascinated by the supply chain and how things happen. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, for sharing all the aspects, the things like, rosters and contracts and whatnot. And a lot of times kind of flies above my head. So that was, thanks for sharing some insights into that. Anything we didn't touch on that, you think would be important to point out or share or anything? And if you don't have anything, that's totally fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to have to get like pulled off the stage with the cane with my friends, family, and colleagues, like with comes to blockchain. Like I can go forever, man. I really can. Like it's definitely at the ground, and I'm not ignorant to that. I understand there's a ways off to trust. I accept that. But at the same time, if you look at the problems that we have in our industry, the wasteful capital, money, energy, where we could be spending our time on like positive things like research and development, new product development. Like it's just a lot of wasted time, and I think it's fixable with blockchain. I think a lot of it is, but like we referenced throughout this call, it's like a lot of hurdles. There's a lot of minds. There's a lot of opinions to get switched in the next couple years to whatever it takes. I just, to me, I just want to, I'm looking forward to being part of that. And like the people I'm doing business with, the companies that I've been involved with, the blockchain stuff and like, Conv2X, which, blockchain and healthcare today, which that group, and that's awesome, and we want to help them. I just think those type of companies, we need to continue to collaborate and talk about how great it is. And even yourself, the work you're doing is part of what I think can help kind of get this out there and make the changes, but see the implementation start to slowly roll out. I just want to be part of that sort of megaphone, the blockchain megaphone into the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard it described as, where like in the mid 90s of the internet, where like most people said it was going to be a fad and it was going to go away and it's a scam. And I always thought of it as like, man, how cool would it have been to, be around then and like see the development of the internet and what we have now. And we're basically at that point when it comes to blockchain. People like you and me fundamentally believe that blockchain is going to change every industry, and that it's going to change how we conduct life. And the fact that we're at, level one of that right now, and we get to see it happen and have conversations like this, it excites me that, in 30 years, the crazy stuff that you're going to be doing, I'll be like, I talked to him when he was, talking to little old me. So
Yeah.
thanks again for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot, and I hope you get some rest during the holidays and enjoy some time with family.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. And thanks again for your work and your time today. It was fun, but hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, and hopefully we run into a conference here in the next year or so. You take care.
Yes, next year, Conv2X is in New Orleans. So you got to come.
Absolutely. That's a fun place. You take care. Talk soon. Bye.